She was about to be stoned to death by her own town, until 5 Lakota warriors arrived to save her. The morning sun rose slowly over the dusty frontier town. Its light fell on the wooden buildings, turning them a soft gold. Birds chirped in the distance, but their song could not quiet the growing tension in the town square. People were gathering, their faces a mix of fear, anger, and curiosity. In the center of the square stood a young woman, her hands tied tightly behind her back. Dust clung to her hair and clothes, and her eyes were wide with fear. She had never felt so alone. The townspeople whispered to each other. Some shook their heads, while others looked away, pretending not to see. Rumors had traveled fast. The woman had been accused of defying the town's strict rules, and the elders had chosen a punishment that left no room for mercy. She was to be stoned. Children huddled close to their parents, unsure of what was happening, while the adults held stones in their hands, their knuckles white with tension. The sheriff, a man in his late 40s with a weathered face and tired eyes, stood near the steps of the town hall. He had always followed the law, but today he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He knew what the punishment was, and he knew it was harsh. Yet when he looked at the woman's frightened face, he felt a flicker of doubt. Was this truly justice, or was it fear and anger guiding the people's hands? He swallowed hard, but he did not speak. The young woman's name was Leela. She had grown up in this town, helping her family on the outskirts, learning to care for animals and tend to small crops. She had always followed the rules as best as she could, but recently she had made choices that frightened the townsfolk. They did not understand her, and their fear had turned into anger. Now, standing in the square, surrounded by people who once smiled at her in greeting, she felt the weight of judgment pressing down on her like a heavy stone. Leela tried to steady her breathing. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her childhood, the fields she had run through, the wind in her hair, and the laughter of her friends. Those memories brought a brief warmth to her chest, but it vanished quickly when she opened her eyes to see the first stones lifted by angry hands. The elders nodded to each other, signaling that it was time. A harsh voice rang out from the steps of the town hall. It was Elder Harrow, a man with a long beard and a voice that carried through the square like a whip. "The law is clear," he said. "No one may defy our town without facing the consequences. This woman has broken our rules. She must pay. She must learn that her actions have meaning, and her punishment will remind everyone of our order." The crowd murmured their agreement. Some shouted words of encouragement to the elders, while others looked at Leela with eyes that burned with judgment. Leela's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to speak, to explain, to tell them she had only tried to help, that she had not meant to harm anyone, but her mouth felt dry, and the rope cut into her wrists when she tried to move. Just as a young man lifted a stone high above his head, ready to throw, a sound came from the distance. It was faint at first, almost like the beating of drums, but it grew louder with each passing second. Horses galloped across the open plains beyond the town. Their hooves kicked up clouds of dust, and the sound echoed through the valley, reaching every corner of the square. People turned, surprised and confused. Whispers ran through the crowd. "Who could it be?" someone asked. "Riders from the north." The horses appeared on the horizon, 5 figures silhouetted against the rising sun. Each rider sat tall in the saddle, their posture calm yet commanding. They wore garments and symbols unfamiliar to the townsfolk, markings of a proud people known for courage and honor. Leela's eyes widened. Could this be help? Could someone save her from the cruel fate that awaited? The riders drew closer, their horses steady and sure. Dust swirled around them, and their presence carried a quiet power. The crowd hesitated. No one had expected anyone to interfere. The elders glanced at each other, frowning. Their authority was being challenged. Elder Harrow's voice became sharper. "Who are they? Outsiders. They have no right to be here." The tallest rider dismounted first, moving with a steady grace that commanded attention. His eyes scanned the square, taking in the faces, the stones, and Leela. He did not shout or threaten, but his calm voice carried across the crowd. "Stop," he said simply. "Do not harm her. She will not be punished this way." A murmur ran through the people. Some laughed nervously, thinking he must be foolish to challenge the town's judgment. Others hesitated, unsure of what to do. The elders' faces turned red with anger. Elder Harrow stepped forward, lifting his hand as if to assert authority, but the rider held up a hand, and the air seemed to pause. The woman's heart raced. She had never seen anyone move with such quiet strength. The rider did not need to raise his voice or show violence. His presence alone seemed to shield her like a protective wall that the townspeople could not cross. Leela's fear mixed with a growing sense of hope. Perhaps she would live. Perhaps someone would stand for what was right. The rider spoke again, his voice firm but calm. "This is not justice. Punishment must be fair and guided by truth, not fear. You do not see her clearly. Step back and listen." Some townsfolk looked at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. A few lowered their stones, hesitant. But the elders would not yield so easily. They barked orders, urging the crowd forward. Tension rose, thick and heavy like the heat of the midday sun. Leela's knees trembled, and she felt tears stinging her eyes. She could not believe this was happening, that strangers had come just in time. The rider stepped closer to Leela, his eyes kind but unwavering. "You are safe for now," he said. "We will not let harm come to you. Trust us and stay calm." Leela nodded, too frightened to speak. She felt the rope against her wrists loosen slightly as another rider moved to stand beside her, a silent promise of protection. The crowd remained frozen, caught between fear, anger, and awe. The presence of the riders had changed everything. Where once there had been certainty that punishment would follow, now there was doubt. No one wanted to be the first to act. The stones felt heavy in their hands, but they remained suspended, unsure whether to throw them or let the strangers speak. The riders formed a small circle around Leela, their horses standing close by. Each rider scanned the crowd, assessing threats, ready to defend without aggression unless absolutely necessary. The leader, the tallest among them, raised his hand again. "We mean no harm to this town," he said. "We are here to prevent an injustice. She is not your enemy. Hear her story before you act." Leela's voice trembled when she finally found it. "Please," she whispered, "I never meant to break your rules. I only tried to help, to do what I thought was right. I did not hurt anyone. Please listen to me." Her words hung in the air. Some townspeople softened slightly, realizing they had not truly understood her actions. Others, fueled by fear and anger, remained steadfast, but the doubt had been planted. The square felt quieter, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. The sheriff watched from the steps of the town hall. He had felt powerless moments before, but now, seeing the courage of the riders and the plea in Leela's eyes, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe this did not have to end in tragedy. Maybe justice could be tempered with mercy. The sun climbed higher, shining on the dust-covered faces of the town. The horses' hooves had stopped echoing across the plains, but the rider's presence continued to resonate like a heartbeat in the square. The crowd remained tense, but the story of the young woman and the arrival of these 5 strangers had begun to shift the balance. For the first time that morning, Leela dared to hope that she might live to see another day. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the open plains stretched wide, promising freedom and safety if she could only survive the coming hours. The square was still dangerous, and the elders were not yet defeated, but the first step toward rescue had been taken. The question now hung in the hot air. Would courage and truth be enough to save her, or would the weight of fear and anger still claim its victim? The crowd in the square remained frozen, unsure of what to do next. Stones hung in hesitant hands, and whispered arguments floated through the air. Some townsfolk stared at the riders with awe, while others glared, unwilling to yield to outsiders. The 5 Lakota warriors, calm and composed, formed a protective circle around Leela. Their presence radiated authority and courage without a single raised voice. The leader, the tall man with a scar across his cheek, stepped closer to the woman. "You are safe for now," he said quietly, his voice firm but gentle. "Do not panic. We will guide you, but you must stay calm. Fear makes it harder to think clearly." Leela nodded, her eyes wide with gratitude. She had never seen such calm strength in anyone before. One of the younger townsmen, still holding a stone, muttered under his breath, "Why should we listen to them? They have no right here." His voice was shaky, betraying his fear. Another elder shouted in agreement, "The law is ours." "They cannot interfere." The tension in the square grew thicker, like smoke in a closed room. The leader did not respond immediately. Instead, he scanned the crowd, his eyes sharp and calculating. He noticed the subtle signs of fear and doubt in the townspeople. Some were beginning to hesitate, lowering their stones slightly, while others still clenched theirs tightly. "Listen," he said finally, his voice carrying through the square. "We do not come to harm you. We only come to prevent an injustice. She is not guilty of what you believe. Step back and hear the truth before you act." The words struck some in the crowd like a sudden gust of wind. The fear that had fueled their anger began to waver. Whispers ran through the people. "Maybe they are right," someone said quietly. "Maybe we were too harsh." Others shook their heads, unwilling to show doubt in front of the elders. Leela swallowed hard and tried to find her voice. "Please," she whispered, "I did not mean to harm anyone. I only wanted to help. I only wanted to do what I thought was right. Please listen to me." Her words were soft, yet they carried a sincerity that touched even some of the hardened townsfolk. The sheriff, standing a few steps away, felt a strange warmth in his chest. For the first time, he sensed that justice might not require cruelty. The Lakota warriors had shifted the balance. He looked at the elders and tried to catch their eyes, hoping they might reconsider. Some of them scowled, but he saw a flicker of doubt even there. The leader of the warriors spoke again, turning to the townsfolk. "In every town, rules exist to protect people," he said. "But punishment must fit the crime. It must be guided by truth and fairness, not fear. If you act without understanding, you will harm the innocent and betray your own principles." His voice carried weight. Even those who had shouted just moments ago began to hesitate. A few townsfolk, mostly younger men and women, lowered their stones completely. They had never seen anyone speak with such calm authority. The presence of the Lakota warriors was not threatening, yet it commanded respect. Leela felt her chest loosen slightly. Perhaps she would survive this day. The elders, however, were not ready to give up. Elder Harrow stepped forward, his beard bristling, and pointed a finger at the leader. "Who are you to tell us what is right? You are outsiders. You do not know our town, our rules, our people." His voice was sharp, but even he could not hide a trace of uncertainty in his eyes. The leader looked at him calmly. "We are warriors," he said. "We follow a code of honor. We defend those who cannot defend themselves. We do not interfere with your town without reason. But when injustice threatens someone who is innocent, we will act. She is not your enemy. She deserves a chance to speak for herself." Leela's voice grew stronger. "I did not hurt anyone," she said, stepping slightly forward despite the ropes on her wrists. "I only tried to save someone who was in danger. I made a choice because I wanted to do the right thing. Please do not let fear guide your hands. I ask for mercy, not escape. Let me explain." The crowd fell silent. For the first time, no one shouted, no one moved to raise a stone. All eyes were on her. Some townsfolk blinked, realizing that they had never actually heard her side of the story. They had acted on rumors and fear, not facts. The young woman's courage, combined with the quiet authority of the warriors, had shifted the balance. One of the warriors, a woman with a determined gaze, stepped forward. "She speaks the truth," she said simply. "We know it because we have seen her actions. Courage and honor guide her, not harm. You must decide if justice means punishment or understanding." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some began to lower their heads, ashamed. Others hesitated, caught between loyalty to the elders and the growing doubt that they might be wrong. The square felt charged, like the calm before a storm, yet also like a turning tide that could carry them toward fairness instead of cruelty. Elder Harrow's hand shook slightly as he held a stone. His face was red and his mouth opened, but no words came out. The leader of the warriors took a step closer to him, not threatening, just watching. The calm power in his gaze made it clear that he would not allow harm to come to the woman. Finally, a small voice spoke from the crowd. It was a young girl, no more than 12, holding a small stone tightly in her hand. "Please," she whispered, "don't hurt her. She didn't do anything wrong." Her voice was soft, but it carried through the tense air. Heads turned toward her. A few others nodded silently. The crowd was beginning to shift, guided not by fear or anger, but by a quiet recognition of truth. The elders whispered among themselves, clearly unsure of what to do. They had relied on fear to keep order, but now, with doubt spreading among the townsfolk, their authority seemed less absolute. Leela's hope grew. She could see the change, slow and fragile, but real. The leader of the warriors motioned toward her. "You will be safe if you follow us," he said. "We will guide you away from danger, but you must stay close and you must trust us." Leela nodded, trembling yet relieved. She had never imagined that strangers could become her protectors in such a short time. The town square seemed to hold its breath as the tension slowly began to dissipate. Some townsfolk whispered quietly, stepping back from the edges of the crowd. Stones that had been raised fell to the ground, clattering softly against the wooden boards. The first small step toward mercy had been taken. The sheriff finally moved closer, his voice firm but low. "Stop," he said. Let them speak, let her speak, we must understand before we act. Even he sounded unsure, but he could see that the tide had shifted. The balance of power was no longer solely in the hands of the angry elders. The 5 Lakota warriors formed a small semicircle around Leela, their horses standing steady behind them. They were silent, but every movement communicated readiness and protection. The townsfolk, sensing that the outsiders would act if anything happened, gave space. Fear had lost its grip, replaced by curiosity, doubt, and perhaps a little hope. Leela took a deep breath and spoke again. I know I have made mistakes. I know I did things you do not understand. But I never meant to harm anyone. I only wanted to help. Please do not let fear make you cruel. I ask for mercy, not escape. Her voice carried the honesty of someone who had no more tricks, no more secrets. She stood tall despite her fear, and her courage inspired even those who had once raised stones against her. The leader of the warriors nodded slightly, acknowledging her bravery. She is telling the truth, he said to the crowd. Listen, do not act on rumor or anger. Justice requires understanding. A few townsfolk lowered their heads, ashamed. Some whispered among themselves, questioning their own actions. The energy in the square shifted slowly, like clouds moving to reveal sunlight. The power of fear was weakening. The young woman, Leela, felt a small spark of hope. She could not yet celebrate. The town still held dangers, and the elders would not easily give up their control. But for the first time that morning, she felt the possibility of survival. The Lakota warriors had arrived at the right moment, and their presence had changed everything. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the square. Horses shifted their weight, and the warriors' eyes scanned the crowd, alert to any sudden movements. Leela remained in the center, protected, her heart beating fast, her hope fragile but real. The story of her rescue was just beginning, and the next steps would test courage, trust, and the strength of those who chose to defend the innocent. The square was tense and heavy with silence. The townsfolk had lowered their stones, but fear still lingered in their eyes. Leela stood in the center, her heart pounding like the hooves of a herd of wild horses. The 5 Lakota warriors formed a protective circle around her, their eyes sharp, their posture steady, ready for any sudden movement. The wind blew dust across the wooden boards of the square, carrying whispers and murmurs from the crowd. Elder Harrow's face was red with frustration. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped a cane, unsure whether to assert his authority or retreat. The leader of the warriors, the tall man with the scarred cheek, stepped closer to him, his voice calm but firm. You must listen. Justice is not fear. Punishment without understanding is cruelty. The elder scowled, his jaw tight. Who are you to speak of justice? You are not of this town, he barked. We make our own rules here. Outsiders have no say. The leader did not flinch. Instead, he raised a hand toward the townsfolk. Stand back, he said. Do not act out of anger. Listen to her story. Hear the truth. Some of the crowd hesitated, unsure. They had lived by fear for so long, but now, seeing the calm courage of the warriors and the plea in Leela's eyes, some began to question themselves. A young man lowered his stone, looking around at his neighbors as if seeking silent permission to do the right thing. Leela's voice trembled as she spoke again. I know I have done things you do not understand, she said. I tried to save someone in danger. I made choices that frightened you, but I never wanted to hurt anyone. Please don't let fear guide your hands. I ask for mercy, not escape. Her words carried honesty and strength echoing through the square. Slowly, some townsfolk began to nod, their doubts growing. The tension began to shift, but the elders were still unwilling to yield. Elder Harrow's eyes narrowed as he whispered to a few trusted followers. They shook their heads, but even they looked uncertain now. The leader of the warriors glanced at his companions. A young woman among them, her eyes sharp and alert, stepped slightly forward. We cannot allow harm to come to her, she said. We must guide her away from danger. Leela's heart skipped a beat. Rescue was close, but the path would not be simple. The townspeople were still angry, and the elders would not surrender their control so easily. The warriors began to shift subtly, creating space around Leela, moving toward the exits of the square while remaining calm and non-threatening. A sudden shout broke the tense quiet. Stop them, Elder Harrow roared. Several men stepped forward, trying to block the warriors' path. The air grew thick with fear and confusion as the townsfolk watched. Stones were raised again, this time more cautiously, but the warriors did not falter. The leader's voice rang out, strong and commanding. No harm will come to her while we are here. stand down, or face the consequences of injustice. Some of the townsfolk froze, unsure whether to obey their elders or trust the words of the outsiders. The tension was palpable, and the square seemed to hold its breath. Leela's hands were still bound, but she felt the warrior's presence like a shield. She could move only a little, but every step they took was careful and deliberate, creating a path toward freedom. The young man who had lowered his stone stepped in front of the elders, raising his hands to calm the crowd. "Please," he said, his voice trembling. "We should listen. Maybe they are right. Maybe this is wrong." A few others nodded quietly. The first stones clattered to the ground as hesitation replaced anger. The elders scowled, but even they began to sense that the tide had shifted. Their control over the crowd was weakening. The leader of the warriors gestured toward a side alley. "This way," he said softly. "We will guide her safely out of the square." Leela nodded, trying not to tremble as one of the warriors stepped beside her to help support her. The rope around her wrists was loosened slightly, enough to ease the pain without letting her go completely free. The crowd parted slowly, some stepping back in fear, others simply unsure of what to do. Elder Harrow barked orders, but his words now lacked the strength they had once carried. The warrior's calm and silent authority had shifted the balance. Leela took a deep breath and followed the protective circle toward the alley. As they moved, the square seemed to close in behind them. The dust swirled around their boots and hooves, and the heat of the sun pressed down on everyone. Leela's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her eyes forward, trusting the warriors to lead her safely. Every step was a test of courage, every glance behind a reminder of the danger she had narrowly escaped. Once they reached the edge of the town, the leader glanced back at the square. "Stay close," he instructed. "Do not panic. We are not yet out of danger." The horses shifted beneath their riders, ready to move at a moment's notice. Leela climbed onto one of the mounts carefully, holding on tight as the warrior beside her offered steady reassurance. The riders led her through narrow paths between buildings, avoiding the main streets where angry townsfolk could still appear. The sound of murmurs and shouts faded behind them, replaced by the wind whistling across the plains. Leela felt the tension in her body begin to ease, but she remained alert, knowing that the danger was not over. As they reached the edge of the town, the open plains stretched before them, wide and golden under the rising sun. The warriors halted for a moment, scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. None appeared. The path ahead was clear, but they knew that safety was not guaranteed until they were far from the town. The leader turned to Leela. "You are safe for now," he said, "but we must continue. We cannot linger here. The town is still dangerous." She nodded, grateful and overwhelmed. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." The warrior beside her smiled faintly. "Your safety is enough," he said. "Live and remember the courage it took to survive today. That is reward enough." They mounted their horses and began to move across the open plains. The wind whipped through Leela's hair, carrying with it the sense of grass, earth, and freedom. The plains stretched endlessly before them, and with every step, the town behind them seemed smaller and less threatening. As they rode, the leader spoke quietly to the others. "We must remain vigilant. The elders may send others after us. Do not let your guard down." The warriors nodded, their eyes scanning the horizon as they guided Leela safely. For the first time that day, Leela allowed herself to breathe deeply. She looked around at her protectors, 5 figures of calm strength against the vast openness of the plains. Each one moved with skill and precision, ensuring her safety without aggression, teaching her the meaning of courage and honor. The journey across the plains was long, but it was also a lesson. The wind carried away the fear that had gripped her heart, replacing it with a cautious hope. The Lakota warriors spoke little, letting their presence guide and protect her. Their eyes were always alert, watching for threats, but their movements were measured, calm, and unhurried. As the sun climbed higher, the plains glowed in shades of gold and green. Leela felt the first real sense of freedom she had known in hours, maybe days. She had escaped the immediate danger, but the memory of the town, the stones, and the fear would linger. Yet she knew that she had survived because of courage, her own and that of the warriors who had stood with her. In the distance, the horizon stretched endlessly. The open sky promised safety, possibility, and a future where she could make different choices. She looked at the leader of the warriors, and for the first time she smiled through tears. He nodded, understanding her gratitude without words. The plains were vast and full of challenges, but with the warriors by her side, Leela knew she had a chance to survive, to grow, and to learn what true courage meant. The first part of her escape was complete, but the story was far from over. Danger might still follow, lessons were still to be learned, and the strength of friendship and honor would be tested as the journey continued. The 5 warriors led her deeper into the plains, their horses moving steadily, their eyes always watchful. Leela rode beside them, feeling the rhythm of their steps, feeling protected, and slowly finding her own courage. The open sky above was vast and beautiful, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope that she could survive, that she could live, and that she might find a new path beyond the fear and judgment of the town. The sun began its slow climb, casting long shadows across the plains. Leela glanced behind at the fading town, realizing that her life had changed forever. She had faced fear, judgment, and near death, and she had survived. The Lakota warriors had saved her, but they had also shown her a truth she would carry forever. Courage and honor could defy even the darkest moments. The wind swept across the endless plains, carrying the scent of grass and distant rivers. Leela sat tall on her horse, feeling both the rhythm of its steps and the steady presence of the 5 Lakota warriors around her. The sun had climbed higher, and the shadows of the morning had faded, but the journey was far from over. Every sound could hide danger, every movement in the distance demanded vigilance. The leader, the tall man with the scar across his cheek, glanced back at her. "We are not yet safe," he said quietly. "The town may send others to follow, but we will keep you protected. Stay close and trust your strength." Leela nodded, her heart pounding. She felt a mix of fear, relief, and determination. She was alive and she intended to survive. They moved steadily across the plains, following a winding path that led toward a narrow canyon. The landscape changed from open grasslands to rocky hills, offering shelter and cover. Leela's eyes widened at the sight. The canyon walls rose tall and jagged, shadows stretching across the dirt floor. She realized that the warriors had chosen this route with care. It offered safety and concealment, even if it demanded careful navigation. The youngest of the warriors, a man with a keen gaze and quick reflexes, rode beside her. "You are brave," he said softly. "Most would have given in to fear long ago. You held your ground in the square and your voice has courage. That matters as much as strength in a fight." Leela smiled faintly, feeling warmth and reassurance. She had been terrified, but she had survived, and now she began to understand the power of standing firm in truth. As they entered the canyon, the wind died down, replaced by a quiet stillness. Birds perched on the rocks, watching cautiously as the group passed. The warriors guided her carefully, pointing out small paths and safe ledges. Each step felt deliberate, like walking through a living maze where one wrong move could mean danger. Leela kept close to her protectors, trusting their guidance and learning to observe her surroundings. Suddenly a sound broke the quiet, a distant shout, faint but unmistakable. The warriors froze instantly. The leader raised his hand, signaling silence. Leela's heart skipped a beat. Danger had not yet disappeared. "Stay close," the leader whispered. "They may have sent someone after us. Remain calm. Fear will not help." Leela's hands gripped the reins tightly. She could feel the power of the warriors surrounding her, their readiness like a protective wall. Each step they took was cautious but confident, guiding her deeper into safety while maintaining a keen awareness of the outside world. The canyon twisted and turned, and soon they reached a small stream. Water sparkled in the sunlight, and Leela could see fish swimming lazily beneath the surface. She dismounted carefully, feeling the cool water on her hands as she drank. The warriors watched her closely, yet they allowed this brief moment of peace. Even in danger, they understood the need to care for the body and spirit. "You have endured much today," the tall leader said, his voice steady. "But courage is not measured only by survival. It is measured by choices. You chose to speak, to stand, to trust honor rather than fear. That is why you are alive now." Leela looked at him, trying to find the words. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I am grateful. I cannot repay you." "You do not need to," another warrior said, his voice calm. "Your survival is enough. Carry it with you and let it guide your path. Live with courage and honor those who have helped you." They rested briefly by the stream, the sunlight warming their faces. Leela felt her body relaxing, though her mind remained alert. The journey across the plains had been long, and the canyon offered temporary safety, but she knew that true freedom required continued vigilance. The warriors began to move again, guiding her along a narrow ledge that overlooked a valley. From this height, she could see for miles. The town was far behind them now, shrinking into a cluster of wooden buildings, dwarfed by the vastness of the land. A sense of relief washed over her. She had escaped the immediate danger, but the lesson lingered. Courage and wisdom must guide her choices, not fear or desperation. As they descended into the valley, they came upon a hidden grove of trees, their branches forming a canopy that filtered sunlight into gentle patterns on the ground. The warriors signaled her to stop. This place, they explained, was safe for the moment, a sanctuary in the wild plains where no one could easily follow. Leela dismounted again, her legs weak but steady. She looked around, feeling a strange sense of awe. Nature itself seemed to embrace her, offering shelter after the storm she had endured. The warriors gave her space to breathe, to rest, and to gather her strength. "You have learned something important today," the leader said softly. "Fear and anger can lead to harm, but courage and honor can change the outcome. Remember this, and it will guide you for the rest of your life." Leela nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She had faced death, had seen the faces of those who had turned against her, and had survived because of truth, bravery, and the courage of others. The experience would remain with her forever, shaping her choices and her heart. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink, the warriors prepared to continue. They had ensured her safety for the day, but the journey ahead was still long. Leela mounted her horse again, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. She had survived the town, but the plains were vast and full of challenges yet unseen. The leader turned to her. "The day is ending, but tomorrow is a new chance," he said. "We will guide you to a place where you can rebuild, where you can live free from fear. Trust in what you have learned today." They moved slowly through the grove, the horses' hooves muffled by soft earth and fallen leaves. Leela kept close to the warriors, feeling the rhythm of their steps and the steady guidance that had saved her life. Every shadow and sound reminded her to remain alert, but the calm presence of the warriors gave her confidence. Night began to fall, and the sky turned deep blue, dotted with stars. The plains stretched endlessly around them, peaceful yet vast, full of both promise and unknown dangers. Leela's heart swelled with gratitude. She had survived fear, judgment, and near death. She had been rescued by courage, honor, and the selfless bravery of 5 warriors who risked themselves to protect her. They reached a small clearing where a fire was already prepared. The warriors gestured for her to rest while they tended to the camp and their horses. The warmth of the fire felt comforting, a small oasis after the tension of the day. Leela sat close, feeling the exhaustion settle into her bones. One of the warriors handed her a small bowl of water and a piece of dried bread. She accepted it gratefully, sipping and nibbling slowly. "You will be safe here tonight," he said softly. "Rest, regain your strength. Tomorrow we continue." Leela leaned back against a tree, looking at the faces of the warriors around her. Each one was strong, alert, and calm. She realized that they were not just protectors. They were teachers of courage, guides who had shown her the power of standing for truth. She had learned that bravery was not only in facing danger, but also in standing tall when everyone else doubted you. The leader approached her quietly. "Tonight is safe," he said. "Rest and know that you are not alone. Your courage has brought you this far, and it will carry you further. Remember what you have learned about trust, honor, and action. These are the gifts you carry from today." Leela nodded, feeling a sense of peace she had not known since that morning. The fire crackled, the stars shone bright, and the world felt vast yet full of possibilities. She closed her eyes, letting sleep claim her, knowing she was safe for the night. Tomorrow the journey would continue. There would be challenges and unknown paths ahead. But tonight she had survived. She had faced fear, injustice, and near death, and she had lived because of courage, both her own and that of the 5 warriors who had stood with her. As the night deepened, the wind whispered through the trees and across the plains. Leela slept, feeling the rhythm of the horses nearby, the presence of her protectors, and the quiet power of the land. The day had tested her, shaped her, and freed her. She had been stoned in the square, threatened by her own town, and yet she had survived, guided by honor, courage, and selfless bravery. And as dawn approached, bringing with it a new day, she knew that her life would never be the same. She had been saved, and with that salvation came the chance to rebuild, to live with courage, and to walk a path guided by truth and honor. The plains stretched endlessly before her, full of promise, adventure, and freedom. For Leela, the story of fear and judgment had ended, but the story of courage, survival, and hope was just beginning. She had been given a second chance, and she would carry it with her always, remembering the 5 warriors who had risked everything to save her, and the lessons of bravery, trust, and honor that would guide her forever.